I hope your time in your breakouts were just a good start to processing what we talked about this morning. I did get some responses from you on some unique Northwest things. So apparently you don't run in the rain. So now I know if I ever go to the Northwest, that's like a dead giveaway that I'm not from the Northwest. So thank you for that tip. Jen Vogel pointed out that they do cinnamon rolls with chili. That I never knew and is interesting. I can't say it's bad until I try it. So one day, Jen, I'll try it. And then somebody else wrote, no umbrellas and socks and Birks. That's a good one. So just wanted to highlight those. Those are funny. Okay, so we're gonna, in this session, venture out. We got to dive inward in our first session. What does it look like to pursue our own self-awareness and transformation? But really in this session, I want to get pretty practical and not keep it conceptual that we dive inward so that we can dive outward. That really needs to be paired together, that we do dive inward so that we can dive outward. And we do it so that we can pursue it alongside other people's journeys. And ultimately it's to fulfill the call that we need to make disciples, and we need to pursue development of others around us, and walk with others around us and be in community with others around us. So I want to dive into the why, like why do we pursue our own self-awareness and transformation, and pursue the discipleship of others, and then also get into the how. We'll probably touch on the how first, and then we'll really land at the why. Because if we don't walk away this morning without the why, what we tend to do is we tend to then venture inward, and then we just stay there. Because it's a pretty easy tendency to do is to just venture inward, and there's a lot in there. And we could easily just spend our whole lifetime allowing God to transform us and pursuing intimacy with the Lord. And that's amazing. That is what we are called to do, is to become more and more like him and pursue intimacy with him. But if it doesn't ultimately transform us so that we can venture outward to others, and journey alongside other people, we're missing it. We're missing a huge part of it. So I really want to get practical with the how we can do that. So we're going to talk about 3 shifts that we can make in our approach in developing other people. So in order to stay practical, I want to take just 10 seconds for you to think about the people in your life. Who do you have in your sphere of influence? Who has God called you to walk alongside? Who could potentially be people that you could walk alongside? This could be friends, coworkers, family, students, mentees, people in your congregation, other people like your neighbors. Who is in your sphere of influence? Who are you walking alongside, and who could you potentially develop? And take 10 seconds to write those names down, or at least ideas of where those people are and who they are. I want to encourage you to think broadly about these types of people, because I think these can be peer-to-peer relationships. They can be mentee relationships, and they also can be generational. So people that are even older, wiser, more experienced than us are still people that we have influence on. So before we dive into some of these practical how pieces, it's almost nearly impossible to have this conversation about being intentional about pursuing developing those around you without first pursuing your own development, which is why I started the morning off with that venture inward. You can only truly pass on what you yourself have experienced and acquired. So the transformation you have experienced, the tools and skills you have acquired, that pursuit or the lack of that pursuit of your own development will severely influence the depth and integrity to which you develop other people. There is only so far you can take other people if you yourself have not gone there before. So keep that as the context to which we're having this conversation about developing others. The other context piece that's going to be super practical to the how is our current context. A lot of what we do within Vision does sometimes focus generationally. So the interns we're now seeing are a wide range of ages, but probably a majority of the people that we work with are between the ages of 18 and 25. And as we continue on, this next generation that's referenced as Gen Z is becoming more and more the types of people that we're working with closely. They are a whole other animal of a generation. We may have some Gen Z people on this call. So I want you to hear, I value Gen Z just as much as I value my own generation, which would be the millennials. And then you have Gen Y, boomers, and so on. Now, again, these are all generalizations, so I don't think they sum up exactly who a person is, but they can really be helpful context for us. Now, there's important things that we've learned about Gen Z that I don't think just pertain to Gen Z, and that's the context that I want to just frame out for us, just so we have an idea and some awareness of the context in which we're developing others. I don't think these are specific to Gen Z, but I think it's specific to how the Bible uses the word generation, which is this time period of space and people. That's all generations of people are in this one space. And that's what they really refer to as a generation, is the people that are living in this day and age. So the people living in this day and age are post 9/11. So we are dealing with the implications of what our world looks like post 9/11. That's the recession, school shootings being normal, high emergency response awareness. You have TSA at airports because of 9/11. So we're noticing that the people and the generations being raised in this post 9/11 world are raised in a culture of fear and security. That can lead to a high pessimistic view of the future, but it also gives them a strong sense and gives us a strong sense that we want to make a difference in the world. You'll see with Gen Z that this is very true for them, which is why an influencer on social media is an actual job in their mind. They want to make a difference in this world. And if they can influence people, they want to do that. This is a world that's saturated by digital technology, hence where we are today on technology. Our whole world is shaped by mobile devices, iPhones, social media, the internet, Zoom. And I think with COVID, that's just increased even more so. We are diverse. Half of Gen Z is non-white. We are the most religiously, racially, sexually diverse generation in all of American history. And so keeping that in mind really gives you a context that they have a natural, Gen Z particularly, has a natural understanding and acceptance of diversity. And then they will come to expect that of the institutions in which they engage with. So that's a call for us as the body of Christ. That will be a natural expectation for Gen Z. But I think as Gen Z is the most diverse, we start to interact as a full generation, that their diversity is not going anywhere. And it will shape who we are, and it will shape the church. Gen Z has a high value of inclusivity and diversity. So this drives a lot of their social justice and their actions. They have strong personal opinions, and they want others to have strong personal opinions. They don't want to be closed off or avoid, they don't want to offend people. They want people to have an opinion and to have it strongly, and they really value that. I think that's going to be key for us as the church as we walk alongside this next generation, but I think it also gives a way for us to engage thoughtfully with this next generation. And then lastly, I think one thing that is shaping this entire kind of time and place in which we're in is anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideation is at an all-time high. There are numerous reasons why. It's complex. It's different than it was before, but we're dealing with a bunch of mental health issues that are prevalent in society. So most likely, as you begin to disciple and influence those around you, you will come across things that you are not equipped to deal with. And so having a holistic view of health, particularly mental health, is going to be really vital in this, in discipling this next generation. But also, I don't think it's just Gen Z that are dealing with anxiety and depression. It is all of us in this current time and place. We have some great resources that we can point you to if you want to understand Gen Z. The Barna Group is a great one. They've put out some great things recently about Gen Z. If you're interested, feel free to reach out to me after this, and I can point you to some of the ones that I've learned the most about Gen Z. But I want to dive into some of these shifts that I was talking about. These are focused on principles, postures, and environments that we can intentionally create for developing people. So our goal is for deeper, more impactful presence, deeper and impactful development of the people that we're influencing. So these shifts, I want to encourage you, are not this is bad, this is good. This is more about a spectrum. So where are you on this spectrum, and how can you continually just to make more impactful shifts that create spaces for development? You're somewhere on the spectrum. And so the question really isn't, how do I stop doing this and start doing this? But really, okay, how can I be more intentional about influencing and developing people? So let's dive into the shifts. The first shift is a principle shift. So we're shifting from a core principle of development that says, let's develop the skill of the leader, and shifts to, let's develop both the skill and the story of the individual. So this shift we're really referring to is about a holistic view of development. It's understanding that all parts of a person are interconnected, that one part of a person cannot exist without the other part. And so as we focus on developing skills of a person, it is fully connected to their story and experiences. So how do we do that? These can be things that we do that tie a person to their story. So as a leader, we're developing them, and we may hit a block or a barrier. Why can't this person move forward? Or what's causing them to really not be able to do this? Or what's a block or a hindrance for them to grow in intimacy with the Lord? That's really what we're trying to zero in on, is finding out what's connected to those things. These things can be rooted in their story, such as a past wounding, undiscovered coping mechanisms, overcompensations, unguarded behaviors, overdone strengths, and just things that are spiritual in nature. So looking at all of these aspects of a person's story really connects them to why they do what they do, and then you can walk alongside how to really pursue transformation in those areas. Ultimately, the effect of development is that we want to produce disciples, and so a disciple is a full being, and so when we just fully seek to develop their skills, and these can be even skills of faith, like reading our Bible and praying can be skills of faith. But when those aren't interconnected and tied to the story of the person that we're developing, there can be huge gaps in their development. We want to seek full transformation of a person's soul, mind, body, and spirit. And that takes into consideration all aspects of a person. The second shift is an environmental shift. So it's a shift from saying, you have something to learn from me, to we have things to learn from each other. Now, this shift, I say, is an environmental shift because it's both a posture you're taking on, but it's also an environment you're creating for mutuality and teachability. It's an environment that says, you have something to learn from me is much more, I'm gonna pass on this. When you shift to we have things to learn from each other, you create an environment of teachability. And we feel like teachability is one of the key elements of development and growth. Why is it that we approach our leadership and our teams with a posture that those with the most experience or seniority know the best? The truth is that everyone around the table brings something unique. Experience, gifts, insights, the way they hear from God, the experiences they've had with God. And God desires to use all of them at the table to develop his people. So before we get into, so the challenge is that the conversation you're having is about your own development, and then also displaying that environment with whoever you're influencing, that you're sharing both what you're learning and what you're learning from them, but also being able to pass on what you have learned, because you do have something to pass on to them. So that teachability environment is going to be really key. It becomes very mutual then, which leads us into our third shift. And our third shift is really an approach or a model shift. And that really is moving away from a programmatic transaction. So you're in a program to be developed as a leader, to really life on life discipleship. And that's why I said it's connected to that mutuality piece, because really it's about my life impacting your life and your life impacting my life. I will say that there are moments where I think you have something to bring to them and to teach them. But when we create that as the sole focus and approach to our development, we're really missing out on what can happen when lives impact lives. So this is about healthy relationships, really. And so healthy relationships are really the catalytic pipeline to where in which development happens. So relationships are the environment it happens. The life on life is really the approach to the discipleship and the development that we're pursuing. True development requires true community, which then requires true vulnerability. And true vulnerability is life on life discipleship. And that context allows development and discipleship to kind of blur the lines that we put up. It starts to break down the guards we build, and we begin to share life with those that we're developing. This adds strength because it begins to then, development starts to then begin to happen in a real life, real world setting. And the world is complex. It's complicated, it's hard, and none of us are coming with the same story. And so when we get to break down some of those barriers and live life on life, we begin to really break down some of the things that prohibit us from moving forward. And we can embrace kind of all of those aspects of life and navigate those things together. So when you then begin to navigate the complexities of life together, you begin to actually influence the development of somebody else's life, and they get to impact yours. And so we get to do it together. So why does any of this matter is kind of the question. And what I want to say is there's two parts to it. One part of it is that discipleship really is cross-cultural. It's cross-cultural work. So look at yourselves as true missionaries to the people that you're developing. And what does it mean to be doing true cross-cultural works? Means that you take on a learning posture. You take on a learning posture of culture. You begin to speak their language. You begin to speak contextually. And then you begin to value what they value with the influence of the Holy Spirit and what the Holy Spirit values. And that's the context in which discipleship happens. And so why do we have to be intentional about what we do? Because it's cross-cultural work. It's not something that's just gonna happen. And yeah, I mean, it will. There will be people that you rub shoulders with and you'll influence people. But if you are intentional about development, and developing others in your life, you will be amazed at what you can see God working through you and what God will do through you, with a bit of intentionality. So why does any of this matter? It matters because it's truly cross-cultural. And the key is that discipleship is going to look different. It's gonna evolve, and it's gonna look different in every time and place that generations tend to find themselves in. And so what we need to do is really seek out an intentional impact when we venture out. That begins with us, that hard internal work, but then also knowing ourselves so that we can venture outwards. And then where I want to leave us, as far as the why, I'm going to switch over my screen so I can read you this passage. I'm going to be in the life of Joshua. Short passage, but it's something that was highlighted to me that I, about a year ago, and it has driven the why of what I do with Envision, but also why I do what I do in my personal life. So starting with Joshua's life, Joshua inherited leadership from Moses. Moses arguably is one of the most fascinating, and for lack of better words, just one of the best leaders that you can really follow in the Bible. I've learned a ton reading some of these old leaders in the Bible, Moses, Joshua, how transfers of leadership happened. What do they do in navigating the complexities of leadership? But something that's key is kind of that legacy piece with Moses and Joshua. And that's the part that I really want to highlight for us. So Moses went through, as you may be aware of his story, he steps into a leadership role. He leads the nation of Israel out of captivity. They begin to build a society. You have that period in his leadership when everybody is going to him for the answers, and that's when he feels like he needs to create the elders of the tribes. And so you start to see him, passing on his leadership and building up others. And then he raises up Joshua. Now Joshua then takes on leadership after Moses. I tended to cling to Joshua when I took on this role as director for Envision. I inherited this role from a very strong leader. And so there was a time period in my early transition into this role where I learned a lot from Joshua. How do you follow in the footsteps of a very strong leader, and really make the leadership your own as well? Because you'll see in Joshua's leadership, he was his own person. He did things differently than Moses, and that was okay. And then you get to the end of Joshua's life. So Joshua 24, 29 through 31 describes the passing away of Joshua. He died at 110. They buried him. Israel served the Lord throughout the lifetime of Joshua, and the elders who outlived him, who had experienced everything the Lord had done for Israel. So it's kind of this picture of Israel just served the Lord throughout the lifetime of Joshua, but then the elders that lived with Joshua and those that had experienced what the Lord had done with Israel. And then you kind of fast forward into Judges 2, verse 6. And you'll see almost the exact same wording that you find in Joshua, but they add in the next phase. So let me read that for us. So you have the phrasing and the passage about Joshua was dismissed. They went to take possession of the land, each to their own inheritance. The people served the Lord throughout the lifetime of Joshua, the elders who outlived him, and all who saw the great things the Lord had done for Israel. So Joshua then, they describe his passing away, his inheritance, his burial. And then you hit verse 10. After that whole generation had been gathered to their ancestors, another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done in Israel. Then the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord and served the Baals. They forsook the Lord and the God of their ancestors who had brought them out of Egypt. They followed and worshiped various gods of the people around them. They aroused the Lord's anger. Ultimately, that's what's at stake. A whole generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done in Israel. And that's the charge that I have for us this morning. May that not be the case for us. The Lord has been evident in this, even in this morning, with us. But I know he's been at work in your life, and he's been at work in my life. If I leave this earth and nobody knows what the Lord has done in my life, what the Lord has done in Envision, what the Lord has done in the Alliance, then I'm missing something. And this passage, I think Jen referenced this when she read the passage that brought the theme for Alliance Women. This passage grieves me. It makes me crazy, because how did that happen? How did a whole generation grow up and not know what the Lord had done in Israel, or what Moses had set up and what Joshua had set up, and then what happened between Joshua and the next generation? So that's why we do what we do. There's people in our midst that are just like that. They need to hear what the Lord has done and what the Lord is doing. And then ultimately it's so that they can pass it on, so that there's not a whole generation that's growing up that won't know the Lord and won't know what he has done. So as a final charge for you, and then I think we have one more song and then we're wrapping up. There is a moment that today you said yes, referencing that dot in your line in your journey of what these 3 hours have been that we've had together. So you've said yes to today, to this moment. You said yes to maybe what God was speaking to you, illuminating in your own life. And this is what I tell our interns. Yes is the space where obedience and trust is formed. So we can say yes, and we're obedient, and there's a level of trust in our saying yes, because there's still so much unknown. There's so much unknown on who we're going to influence in our life, or what God's really going to do transformationally within my life or your life. But the unfolding of that yes is where intimacy and relationship is formed, where God is going to call you deeper, and he's going to call you to transformation. So the charge I have for you is to continue to say yes, and then pursue the unfolding of that yes. Pursue the intimacy and relationship that is formed as that yes gets unfolded. Then take that and pass it on to others. I don't think we can afford to have a generation that will come after us that doesn't know the Lord or what he has done through us. So pursue the transformation of Jesus, and then go and pass it on to others. I'm honored to do this journey with you. Like I said early on this morning, there's a deep work happening within me, and I believe the Lord wants to do a deep work with you. And so we get to do this together. I'm grateful that I got to spend the time with you, even virtually this morning, and see some of your smiling faces. But really just want to encourage you that we're all in this together, and we can really pass on a legacy of faith to the next generation of what God's doing. So thank you for having me, and welcome any feedback or questions, and I'll put my email in the chat if you'd want to get in touch with us. If you want to know more about Envision, you can follow us on social media. We are Envision, or follow us or go to our website, weareenvision.com, to find out more about what we do with Envision. But happy to be with you.
Thank you so much, Jen. And actually, we do have a little time for some questions. So I'm going to go ahead and just give you a couple questions now, and then definitely if people have more later, to send you an email and connect with you personally, that'd be great. But as you're talking about discipleship and kind of that relationship mentoring and all of that, I'm wondering if you have, I mean, you talked about that we don't want it to just be a program, which is, I think, where a lot of us tend to just like, okay, let's make a program to do this. But do you have some kind of practical first steps for people who are like, yeah, I'm totally on board with that, but I have no idea what to do? Some suggestions for us there?
Yeah, sure. So I would also emphasize the programming is not bad. I mean, Envision is built on programming to some extent. We have an internship program where you can take a team trip, which is a program. But what probably those first couple initial steps that could lead somebody to away from just program focus to that life on life piece would be, don't overestimate the power of the normal things that you do in your life. So one of the most fun stories that I hear come out of our sites are conversations and interactions that happen over normal things, like doing laundry, or teaching a high school student how to do laundry. But then the level of depth and conversation that you can weave into the simple moments. One of our site leaders in Africa used to have a very long drive to one of their ministry locations. It was about 2.5 hours. He would intentionally make sure that the intern that was on the ground with them sat next to him, because it was usually a group that was going. But he would intentionally say, like, no, you have shotgun. We have 2.5 hours together. And he would use that time in that space. And you're not looking at each other, and you're looking at the scenery, and you'd be so surprised how many guards can go down in those everyday moments. So something I love to do is invite somebody over to bake cookies with me, or to go to a coffee shop and both work remotely together. And in those in-between moments, you'd be surprised at what you could really notice, or what you can really talk about. And then the second piece to that of really getting started is, don't overlook those things. So if you notice somebody doing something that is curious, or that's an interesting way to approach something, like, tell me more about that. Why do you do that? Or where did you learn that? What, highlight some of those things, reflect back to them what they're doing, and try to get them to ask the deeper questions, just by your reflection and engagement and genuine curiosity at their life. So don't overlook the simple moments is what I would say in response to that.
Thank you so much. That's really good. But another question would be just about, you've shared a little bit about what you do with Envision, and I know that's a huge broad, there are so many different things, but I'm wondering if you could just give us a taste of a couple different types of ministries that happen at different Envision sites, because I'm sure they're all different from each other.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I'll maybe go around the world just so I can remember what we do. So Taiwan is one of our oldest sites. We have a coffee shop and a church plant. So they do a coffee shop ministry where they are just embedded in a community, and they have interactions with those that come to the coffee shop. They also run some programming out of the coffee shop. So they do an English night. They do some conversational group things. Teams and interns will come and do specialized nights. So I think one person had a specialty in making sushi. So they had like a sushi night, and people came and they all made sushi together. So there's a bunch of communal activities that happen at our Taiwan site. They're located right at the heart of Taipei. So like the Times Square of Taipei, really. So they have a really young, vibrant people that they interact with. Let's see, our Philippine site does young people development. So they actually have a mixture of local Filipino interns as well as Western American interns that join cohorts of internships that they do at the site. They partner with a school that reaches those that are in the urban poor community that live off of $1 a day type of location. So they do much more urban poor ministry. Our Africa locations are just getting up and running again after some pausing due to some local terrorist activity and security issues. So we're in the process of rebooting those. Our Paris site does some coffee shop ministry, English classes. They use the Alpha course, which is an kind of a evangelistic method, has worked super great with the people that they interact with. They work in a very international location, so they work with not just the Parisians, but those that are there that work internationally. Now I'll swing over to our domestic side to give you a brief overview of that. Our New York City site is one of the projects that Jen mentioned. They work with West Africans that have found themselves in New York City. The couple that runs that site were previously IWs in West Africa, found themselves in the US due to some family complications and stuff. They were walking down the streets of New York City and heard the tribal language that they had learned when they were in West Africa. And that's when the Lord prompted them, that said, you don't need to go anywhere. I'm going to use you here to reach West Africans. So their main focus is really about just helping equip and develop, as well as just resource the West African community there with basic English skills or technology training, registering kids for schooling, navigating community access and resourcing. So that's a big part of what they do. Our Atlanta site does a lot of refugee and immigrant outreach. So Clarkston, Georgia is one of the most diverse square miles in all of the US, with 80 different people groups or something like that. I mean, it's just amazing. And these are all unreached people groups to the gospel. So we're finding a lot of effectiveness in some house church planting with that. They find themselves in apartment complexes that don't have running water or electricity. And so it's amazing what is happening in Atlanta. During COVID, they've become a full-blown food operation distribution center. Our Atlanta site has been giving food to refugees and immigrant populations that normally get community assistance and have found themselves not being able to just get everyday food and water type of things. So that's a little glimpse, not everything, but maybe a little glimpse of what we see happening at our site.
Yeah, thank you. And we did have a question just pop up that I think is good. What about, a lot of the ministries sound like they're for younger people. So if an older person is interested in serving with Envision, is there a place for that?
Absolutely. So if you look on our website or contact our office, we have something called the Give Back program. So that's with experienced professionals or retirees. Our oldest, we say he's our oldest intern, was 85. So I would say any age we can use you. And if you have a particular skill or experience, or you just want to go and visit a place and really pour in what you have to give, we can use you. And we've found that our Give Back individuals bring such a level of encouragement and resourcing to the ministry on the ground that is like no other. So yeah, absolutely. At any age, we would love to have you, both at our Envision site, but also if you or your church have alliance workers or an alliance partnership anywhere else in the world, we can help you facilitate getting to those partners of yours. We also send teams and interns to any alliance ministry around the world and just help facilitate some of the onboarding and logistical things that can sometimes be a little bit burdensome. So if we can help get you somewhere, we would love to do that.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.